What's cracking, y'all? You are now watching Boo TV. Appreciate you for stopping in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified, and let's get into the topic for today.
What's cracking, y'all? How good was Tim Duncan actually? From the YouTube channel Nonstop. Well, for all of us old heads out there that watch Tim Duncan play, I don't have to say anything to you. I know you guys know what Tim Duncan brought to the table. I know you guys knew how fundamentally sound he was, how he was pretty much the ultimate team player. Could score at will, but he didn't score at will. He did it when he needed to, if it was a required supplement for team success at the time. He was an elite defensive player. Tim Duncan had a high basketball IQ. Tim Duncan was as humble as it gets when it comes to an NBA superstar. Many people thought his playing style was boring. A lot of people didn't watch him play on TV just because how the Spurs played, just not Tim Duncan, but a lot of people didn't like watching that kind of basketball, though it was very good basketball. Simple basketball. Basketball is a simple sport. Don't make it too complicated. You keep it simple. You stick to the fundamentals. You will see success. You will reap rewards. Tim Duncan understood this. Pop understood this. And the team understood this. But it took their two leaders being on the same page and Tim Duncan as a guy on the floor, the best player and the ultimate leader, setting the example for everybody to fall in line. You see, from the top down, the Spurs organization was very militant, if you want to say, militarized. How they ran things, how Pop runs things. Even upper management as well to some degree, you know? But Tim Duncan was what you would call an unassuming killer on the court, man. When I tell you, I'm a lifelong Laker fan, people. I had Kobe and Shaq on my team through the 2003-2004 season. From the 90s through the 2003-2004 season. I had Kobe and Shaq on my team. And I can't tell you how scary the Spurs were in Tim Duncan. We had no answer for Timmy. Now, they didn't have an answer for Kobe and Shaq either, but we didn't have an answer for Timmy. And that team basketball that they ran so well. And then when they got Parker and Ginobili, boy, they were a lot to deal with. They were. But Duncan was that guy, man. His skill set, his post game was phenomenal. He could hit off-balance shots like no one else, especially at his size. Played center and power forward, really. Was a master at using the backboard, master with angles. Wasn't flashy. Quick decision-making. Went right into his movements. Master at, sweeping through the center lane, throwing up that hook or that layup. Wasn't always the strongest guy. Wasn't always going to overpower you, but solid enough. Even if he couldn't bully his way to the paint or as deep as he wanted to, he'd still get off a quality shot because he had a vast repertoire. Surprisingly slippery, sliding off people's body when coming around, curling towards the rim. Dude was incredible. And his defense was top tier. He guarded that paint very well. Not just block shots, but lockdown defense, disrupting and deflections. You talk to a bunch of young people that really didn't watch Tim Duncan play, and they'll quickly say Tim Duncan's the greatest power forward to ever play the game because they're only regurgitating what they hear everybody else say. But I urge you, young folks, to actually go watch some extensive footage of Tim Duncan play basketball. I understand. You probably don't want to sit there and watch it. You're going to be like, oh, this is so boring. And then you'll be like, all right, I accept it. He's the greatest. I'm looking at his accomplishments. I'm looking at all the All-Star selections, the All-NBA selections, offensive and defensive. I'm looking at the MVPs. I'm looking at the Finals MVPs. I'm looking at the championships. I get it. He's the greatest. I don't want to watch him. Go watch him play. He played a beautiful game. And the NBA was more beautiful back then. Play styles, players, teams, they were more unique. Now everybody plays the same. To me, this is boring. And the current NBA that we have. What Tim Duncan was doing, in my opinion, was not boring. It's beautiful basketball. But anyway, I'll shut the hell up. You don't have to tell me how good was Tim Duncan. I know who the hell Tim Duncan was. But for these young cats that, like I said, you didn't watch him play, but you'll admit he's the greatest because that's what everybody else say. Watch this video with me. And then after this, check out my Tim Duncan playlist. Go watch my other Tim Duncan content. And then just watch whatever the hell you want to watch. Let's get into it.
Hall of Famer, owner of 5 NBA rings with the Spurs, and arguably the worst dresser the NBA has ever seen. But he nearly had a quadruple-double in a game. His response was, that's cool. Duncan was the most quiet, unassuming, and yet one of the best players to ever play. We'll discuss, was he really that successful because of the Spurs, or were the Spurs that good because of him? From swimming to basketball. Tim Duncan was born in 1976 in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He was the youngest of 4 siblings and dreamed of becoming a professional swimmer like his older sister. Tim was extremely talented, and the grand plan was to compete at the freestyle events in the '92 Olympics in Barcelona. However, after a hurricane destroyed the only Olympic-sized pool on the island, Tim had to make other plans. Because of his fear of sharks, he didn't want to train in the ocean and decided...
That's crazy. It's always crazy to see how unpredictable things, unforeseen things completely change what direction people go in life. If that hurricane never happens, maybe Tim Duncan really pursues a career in swimming. I didn't even know his sister was a professional swimmer.
To pick up basketball at the age of 14. Duncan was awkward and raw at first, but he was also a quick learner, and after a 10-inch growth spurt, he soon became the best player in the Virgin Islands. Duncan averaged 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 blocks per game as a senior, after which he accepted a scholarship offer to attend Wake Forest University. 4 years at Wake Forest, after a promise to his mother. Duncan wasn't even supposed to be playing in his freshman year at Wake Forest, but after a fellow big man, Mokhtar Ndiaye, violated NCAA rules and eventually transferred to Michigan, Duncan was appointed as a starting center. Offensively, Timmy was still a bit limited at the time, and he averaged just 9.6 points per game. But at the defensive end, he was arguably the best defender in the country already as a freshman, with 9.6 rebounds and 3.8 blocked shots per game. Because he was extremely disciplined, coachable, and curious about the game, Duncan was soaking in basketball knowledge like a sponge. As a sophomore, Timmy was already among the best players in college basketball. He could have easily been a top draft pick as a sophomore or a junior, but because of a promise to his late mother, Duncan decided to stay 4 years in college. Tim's mother passed away from breast cancer just 1 day before his 14th birthday. On her deathbed, he promised her he would finish college and get a degree. In his 4 years at Wake Forest, Duncan averaged 16.5 points, 12.3 rebounds, and an incredible 3.8 blocks per game. Timmy was a 2-time ACC Player of the Year and a 3-time All-American, and a winner of back-to-back ACC titles with Wake in 1995 and 1996, the first the program won since the 1960s. Tim led the Deacons to the NCAA tournament every season, and as a senior in 1997, he won All-National Player of the Year honors and had half the NBA dreaming of landing the first pick. The fate would have it that the Spurs won the draft lottery, and Duncan moved to San Antonio at the age of 21, which would also become his jersey number.
I say this to all you young cats out there because everybody just wants to do the one and done thing, and get it in, go to the NBA. And I get it because you're like, I want to go in now because the opportunity, the door is open. I need to get in. You never know. I can get an injury in college and then I'll never get to the NBA. I do get that, but from a developmental issue, sometimes it's good to just do extra year or 2 years in college to develop and then go into the NBA, because sometimes you get into the NBA too early and you get fed to the sharks, and some people never recover from that. So just something to think about. But I get the argument for both sides.
now hanging from the rafters in the AT&T Center, dominating the league from the get-go, and 4 NBA titles. 4 years of college had paid their dividends when Timmy got to the NBA. He was no ordinary rookie, and Charles Barkley has said it best: "I have seen the future, and he wears number 21. Duncan finished his first season with 21-12 and 2.5 blocks. He was named an All-Star, Rookie of the Year, and made the All-NBA First Team, which is a feat only he and Larry Bird accomplished in the last 50 years. The Spurs lost in the playoffs to the Jazz, who went to the finals, but they would come back with a vengeance. In a lockout-shortened season, Duncan and the Spurs secured the first seed, and they steamrolled through the playoffs. They've only lost one.
I would have loved to see the Bulls come back for the 98-99 season to go against the Spurs. A lot of people think the Spurs would have beat the Chicago Bulls, but I don't know. I get it. Jordan's a year older. Everybody's a year older from the Bulls. Maybe they might have needed to do some retooling, get a few more young heads in there, but it would have been nice to see. Or even if they would have beat the Utah Jazz in the 98 playoffs to face the Bulls, I would like to see that too.
One game before the finals, where they beat the Knicks in 5 games. The Spurs won their first championship in franchise history, and Duncan deservedly won the finals MVP with 27 points, 14 rebounds, and 2.2 blocks on 54% shooting. After the series, Pop congratulated the Knicks head coach Jeff Van Gundy and told him, "Hey, don't feel bad. I had Tim Duncan on my team, and you didn't." In the next 3 seasons, Duncan's individual numbers grew, and he won the MVP in 2002, but the Spurs couldn't get past Shaq and Kobe. Timmy repeated as the MVP in the 2003 regular season with 23, 13, and 4, and 3 blocks. In the playoffs, they finally got past the Lakers, and then defeated the Nets 4-2 in the NBA Finals. Duncan was again the Finals MVP, and he completely dominated the series. 24.2 points, 17 rebounds, 5.3 assists, and an astonishing 5.3 blocks. The Spurs,
when they finally beat my Lakers in the 2003 playoffs, that hurt. And I think it was game 5. The series might have been tied 2-2. And the game went down to the wire. Robert Horry, in Robert Horry fashion, got a good look at a 3 to change the tides of the game. And the 3 went in and out. I just remember Kobe's expression after the 3 popped out the rim.
whole philosophy was to funnel everybody into the paint, where Duncan would meet them with his perfect positioning, 7'5" wingspan, and sneaky athleticism. 2003 Duncan was the peak Duncan, and I would put this season next to some of the most dominant seasons in history, including Shaq in 2000, Jordan in 1991, and LeBron in 2013. In 2004, the Lakers avenged the loss and defeated the Spurs in the second round. In 2005, San Antonio was back in the finals again, this time against the Pistons, the defending champions.
Even in 2004, if Derek Fisher doesn't hit that miracle shot after Tim Duncan's miracle shot, Spurs might win that series.
In a hard-fought 7-game series where the Spurs never scored 100 points, Duncan willed the Spurs to victory and was again the finals MVP with 20 points, 14 boards, and 2 blocks on average. In 2007, the Spurs were in the finals again against 22-year-old LeBron and the Cavs. Tim was standardly great and led the team in rebounds, assists, and blocks, but the finals MVP went to Tony Parker, who led both teams in scoring. DNP, old, and back to the finals. From 2008 to 2012, the Spurs continually made the playoffs, but couldn't reach the finals in a tough Western Conference. Tim Duncan's numbers have dropped, but mostly because Popovich was saving his best player for the playoffs as a load management pioneer. One of the funniest little jokes Pop played with Timmy is when he didn't play him in a game under the explanation of old age. And that was the narrative around the franchise, that they were too old and too boring. And just when everybody thought the Spurs were finished, they proved why they were the best organization in the NBA. With the development of Kawhi Leonard, Tony Parker reaching his prime, and one of the deepest benches in the league, R.C. Buford and Pop surrounded yet another winning team around Tim Duncan, who was still the most important player on the Spurs. His athleticism and mobility were not nearly as good as before, and Duncan could barely jump off his left leg. However, he was still the big fundamental and one of the most cerebral players in the league, and led the Spurs to another finals appearance. He led the team in points, rebounds, and blocks in the finals against the Heat, who nearly escaped defeat in Game 6, with LeBron's heroic performance and some help from Jesus. Not that Jesus, we mean Shuttlesworth, who hit the most important three in NBA history.
You should go watch Angry Old Hoops fan, AOH. He did an excellent breakdown of this game, because there's some false narratives surrounding people's contributions in this game, specifically, especially with the Miami Heat. I suggest you go watch it and see, who really made the impactful plays. He broke it down so beautifully.
Fifth title. Maintaining great, LeBron and the Heat dominated the East again, and the Spurs advanced in the West. Duncan was 37 years old. He was still averaging 15 and 10 on 57% shooting in the finals, where the Spurs played the most beautiful basketball of the entire Popovich era and completely dismantled the Miami Heat 4-1. Next season, at the age of 38, Timmy made All-NBA third team and All-Defensive second team, which shows how much he was dedicated to basketball and how great he was as a player. After that, his body finally couldn't take it anymore, and we've seen Father Time catch up to Tim Duncan in 2016, when he played the last game of his career at the age of 40. Swimming with Coach Pop. Tim Duncan's greatness is always linked to San Antonio, and vice versa. A question that's often asked, if Tim Duncan would be so good without the great Greg Popovich and the most stable
That is a stupid question. Of course, I hate when people do that. This guy wouldn't be good without that player. There's certain caliber of player. I don't give a damn what coach, what other all-star you put him with what. That player is going to be that player regardless. People used to do that with Kobe a lot. It used to piss me off. And they're like, he couldn't do anything without Shaq. He's nothing without Shaq. Shaq makes him so much better. And then Kobe, of course, goes out and proves otherwise, wins 2 more championships, continues to be dominant. Not that he needed to do that, but I'm like, how could you not see, Kobe was Kobe? Of course, you don't watch the games. You're just a hater. Tim Duncan's another one. These guys are going to be all-time greats regardless. And typically, a player of that caliber is bound to win a championship, regardless to, what team they go to or what players you put around them. Eventually, they'll figure it out at least once. At least.
Organization in American sports for the last 20 years. The Spurs were the Patriots of the NBA. Tim was their Tom, and Pop was their Bill. When asked what the secret of his success is, Pop will always say he was lucky that Tim Duncan fell into his lap in the second year as the Spurs coach. There is some truth in that, because the Spurs never reached the finals without Duncan. But as much as Timmy made Pop a coaching legend, Pop made Timmy a playing legend also. Duncan would have been great if he ended up anywhere, but the main man of San Antonio has allowed him to be even better than great. He pushed him to become a legend and one of the 10 best players of all time. When Pop yelled at Duncan at the practices and games, he stoically took the verbal abuse from his coach. While he was the best player in the world, the others had no choice but to follow suit. And that's why Duncan and Popovich were made for each other. Pop showed that he is special when he visited Duncan in the Virgin Islands after the draft lottery and went swimming with him in St. Croix. Pop spent 4 days with his #1 overall pick, and the two men, with 37 years age difference, just hung out and talked, not about basketball, but about life. His unorthodox approach, in which he always took interest in who his players were as human beings, yielded 2 decades of success. From 1997 to 2019, San Antonio did not miss the playoffs. The Spurs won 70% of their games during the Duncan era, the best 19-year run by any NBA team in history, and the best in all 4 major American sports. Legacy: the most boring superstar and top 10 player ever. Watching Tim Duncan play basketball is very often like watching someone fish. Waiting, boredom, and some more waiting. But in the end, Duncan is usually the man with the fish in his hand. Since the retirement of Michael Jordan, no one has had a more successful career than Tim Duncan. Duncan is the only player in NBA history to be selected on the All-NBA and All-Defense teams during each of his first 13 seasons, 6 more than anyone else in league history. Rare are the players whose continued excellence is so enduring and so common that it goes unnoticed over time. even though we are all aware that it is there. Duncan has quietly dominated the league for years, with no controversy, no insane dunks, no constant media appearances. Even his big games look kind of modest. There was no complete takeover with incredible shooting like Curry or Clay. Nor was there what the fans often value most, sometimes a forced takeover of the game in the last few minutes like Kobe Bryant, Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan. No. Timmy played the same way in almost all situations. Make the right move, pass to an open teammate, make a jump hook, make a bank shot, close out the rebound. Be smarter than your opponent. Nothing in his game was exciting. Duncan had just 835 dunks during his career, which accounts for one.
But it was beautiful.
One dunk every other game. I only remember 2 of his baskets in his entire career. A falling shot over Shaq in 2004 that was annulled by Fisher, and a game-tying 3 against Phoenix in 2008. Everything else was a blur of bank shots, hooks, and tip-ins. And the man scored 26,000 points in his career. Methodical, constant, at times even sterile and unattractive. But most importantly, he got the job done. When someone loses 20 pounds at the age of 36, and when he changes the way he runs to reduce knee pressure, and then leads his team to 2 more NBA finals, now that's greatness, and shows tremendous passion for the sport. Duncan gave multiple discounts to the Spurs so they could spend on other players.
That is also
on
true.
And off the floor, he almost always did the right thing. Everything was simple and maximally efficient. When Duncan retired, quietly, and without a farewell tour, the greatest power forward the NBA has ever seen was gone, and there will never be another one like him.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that the sacrifice, not just the sacrifice on his stats because he played away Pop, wanted to play that team basketball. Not just that, but the money he sacrificed to make sure he kept his team relevant. You don't see superstars doing that, man. You don't. They're going to try to get their money because they feel they deserve it. Not saying they don't, but that comes with your team's going to take a hit, especially if they're not willing to go over the luxury tax, So that has to be mentioned too. That is a good point. I didn't think about that. But yeah, him and Pop had a special bond, man. Timmy was special, man. He was. My mom was a Tim Duncan person. I remember as a kid growing up, I was a Kobe guy. Everyone in the family were Jordan people overall. But I was the Kobe guy. My brother was a Iverson guy after Jordan. My dad became a Dwayne Wade guy after Jordan. My other brother, I don't really think he attached to anybody after Mike. He picked somebody new, whoever was hot. One time he'd be at Iverson, then he'd be like, nah, I'm a Grady that guy. Then he'd be like, nah, it's Agent Zero, Gilbert. He's like, nah, Dwayne Wade. Then he became Kevin Durant, people. Then he became a Russ guy after KD left. Anyway, with that being said, my mom was also a Tim Duncan person after Mike. She was always talking about, yeah, but what y'all got for Timmy, the Spurs, Timmy. I was like, we don't want to hear about Tim Duncan. But I'm going to learn about Tim Duncan. Yeah. Hey, man. Yeah, I don't know if I don't think we will ever see somebody quite like him again. Tim Duncan was special. So all I got to say about it, folks, check out our Tim Duncan playlist. Like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, stay notified. Catch you on the next one. We out, baby.